What makes a powerful protagonist? Can the story's plot exist without them? Does the story feel like it's missing something when they're not around? Do they have an impact on the environment and the characters around them? Do they consistently carry every book or comic or show, no matter how fast or slow the plot's pacing gets, no matter how complicated or simple the plot is? Do they leave a lasting impression on your audience? I think there's more than one way to write a powerful protagonist, but however you write them, they should still have a significant impact on your story, otherwise just anybody could fill their role. Maomao, the mad scientist protagonist of the Apothecary Diaries, is one who carries her story. She easily dominates every scene she's in. She drives the plot forward whether reluctantly or willingly. She affects real lasting change in the environments she enters or gets forced into, and her background and upbringing allow her to have fresh ideas and insights in the traditional and never-changing world of the Imperial Palace. Also, she is super entertaining to watch. I freaking love her. I never know what's going to come out of her mouth, or what crazy thoughts are going to come out of her head, and it makes her really fun to follow. Hello world, I'm Prince Dumi, rightful heir of the multiverse, and welcome to Writing Thoughts. The Apothecary Diaries quickly became one of my most favorite stories this past anime season, and a big part of the reason why is the incredible main character. It's the type of story that leaves me resisting every temptation to just read the light novels after every episode. I'm not exaggerating when I say that every 20-something minute episode of the anime felt like it was over in 2 minutes, and I was always left hungry for more story. It's a testament to how good the writing is, and I hope that something I write captivates someone like that someday. I hope that I can write protagonists just as delightful as Maomao, so I thought that I would gush a bit about her as a character, and hopefully you and I can learn something from this on how to improve our own protags. For those of you who don't know, the Apothecary Diaries is the story of Maomao. The daughter and apprentice of a pleasure district apothecary sits in a fictional country similar to ancient China. She gets kidnapped and sold to the Imperial Palace while she's out delivering meds and collecting herbs, and winds up having to work in the rear palace as a serving girl until her 2-year sentence is complete. During her time there, she finds herself caught up in the palace's internal politics, as well as the hierarchical disputes and rivalries between the emperor's concubines, solving medical and murder mysteries with the help of her apothecary skills and her analytical mind. I guess you could call this a political medical mystery with an addictive mix of drama and comedy. The characters are colorful and well written with plenty of depth and charm, no matter how grand or small their roles may seem. If you're familiar with Snow White with red hair and Raven of the Inner Palace, then this anime feels like a mix of the two, with its themes and setting matching one or both stories in similar ways, as well as both being carried by well thought out female protagonists. That's as far as I'm willing to go to describe the story without spoiling anything. Watch the anime for yourself and come back to this video when you're done. As for the rest of you who've watched this show or don't mind spoilers, let's talk about our best girl and why she's such a powerful protagonist. One of the first things we learn about Maomao is that she is usually cool and really level-headed about things. This girl is not easily rattled. She knew being kidnapped and sold was always a possibility, so when it happened to her minutes into the first episode, she quickly just accepted it as just one of those things that happens to girls in her area, and her thoughts were mainly focused on how her father would be worried. To me, she looked more startled and annoyed rather than panicked or scared when the kidnappers grabbed her. When she's being carried off like cargo to the Imperial Palace, she only looked bummed out. A 3-month time skip later, we find out that she's adjusted to this abrupt shift to servant life in the rear palace, and she's chosen to accept her lot in life and just lay low and avoid any attention that could lead to promotions or beheadings until she's completed her 2-year term and is free to go home. Our girl is way too chill. She sometimes seems a little too unnaturally cool about things. She has the energy of an old war veteran who's seen it all and just can't be bothered by things anymore. But that's one of the things that just makes her so interesting to follow. She sees no point in dwelling on how unfair her life or situation is, so she doesn't, even though she would have preferred to go home to the brothels. She just takes all of life's blows on the chin and moves on to the best of her ability. That isn't to say she isn't bothered by her situation though. We learn that she does get paid for her work, and her kidnappers get a cut of it as the ones who sold her. Revealing she could read would get her a bigger pay, which would give her kidnappers a bigger cut. She doesn't like the idea of giving them more money, so she pretends to be illiterate to give them as little as possible just to spite them. It's the only act of defiance she can manage as a powerless peasant girl. We also learn a few episodes later that she actually is angry about being kidnapped, but she just doesn't waste that energy directing it at everything and everyone else. It is what it is. The things we learn about her next is that she's tomboyish, sassy, clever, and eccentric. The way she walks, the way she carries herself, her speech pattern, and her vocal tone all come off as masculine. Even the crude sense of humor she gained from her time in the brothels comes off as a bit masculine. But she doesn't feel like a male character reskinned as a girl. There are other characters the author purposefully chooses to give a mix of masculine and feminine traits, and Maomao is only one of them. She appreciates good-looking men, but she just doesn't lust after them. She recognizes and appreciates traits in men that would make them good husbands, but she doesn't simp. One of my favorite things is watching Jinshi try and fail to use his beauty to manipulate her, and she only ends up being creeped out by his behavior instead, and glaring at him in disgust while all other women lose their minds, swooning, fangirling, and fainting all around him. On top of that, she frequently looks out for her fellow women, regardless of allegiance or rank, even when their behavior is unacceptable. She understands the thoughts of women around her better than the men around her because she obviously relates to them more as a fellow woman herself. After being promoted to the lady-in-waiting position, she still spends her time with her servant girlfriend, even sharing food from the Jade Pavilion with her. She may be a tomboy, but I wouldn't necessarily call her one of the guys either. Guys find her odd. Girls find her odd too, and even a little scary, but that's okay. She's just herself, and she's awesome. Honestly, her feminine traits come out the most when she's drinking poison. She's the type of girl who dances when she's surrounded by a variety of ingredients to make drugs. She giggles and swoons at the idea of poisoning herself and feeling the stinging sensations on her tongue. This girl is dangerously dedicated to her medicinal research, to the point that she even harms and poisons herself just to test the new concoctions she made to treat them, as well as build her own personal tolerance. Just look at her gleefully having this poisonous snake nom on her arm. Even the snake is confused by her behavior. Her dad was right to call this girl a mad scientist. He even had to forbid her from examining dead bodies because he was afraid of her curiosity leading her to grave robbing just to test out the medicinal uses of corpses, and nobody who knew her was surprised upon learning this. When she drank poison at the royal garden party, she slurped it up and licked her lips like it was the finest meal she'd ever had, and she looked so alluring while doing it. She looked downright gorgeous. She was practically glowing as she thought about how delightful it would have been to have the poison coursing through her body if she had only swallowed it. She looked so adorable when she asked Jinshi if she could have the rest of the poison soup, and she looked like she was having the time of her life when she was throwing up the poison thanks to the palace's drugs, even admiring how good the drugs were at getting her to throw up. Her poison and drug obsession is one of the most fun traits about her character, and it also affects her strengths and weaknesses as a person. She's smart and hardworking and observant, but she also has trouble retaining information on anything she has no interest in. This is why she fails the court lady exam at the beginning of the new cour, even though she has extensive knowledge on drugs and poisons and ridiculously good detective skills. She also frequently shows her cunning when we learn of the little things she does to survive in the world she lives in. Like how she purposefully uses makeup to give herself freckles so that the men in the pleasure district are less likely to drag her into a back alley and sexually assault her. Since she's both skinny and flat-chested and freckles are viewed as ugly, she uses this to put off any man who might otherwise target her if they leave a brothel not completely sexually satisfied. It's a dark and sobering bit of information about herself that she shares in the straightforward and nonchalant manner she always speaks in. Though she's intelligent and capable, she's still only 17 and doesn't know everything or have a whole lot of life experience yet. And this is shown to us when she gets a chance to finally go home for 3 days and ends up having to investigate an attempted murder with her father at one of the local brothels. We soon learn that her dad still schools her, using every new investigation as a teaching moment for her and solving mysteries faster than her with less information than she'd need to do it. He's clearly a man with a whole lot more experience and knowledge than her, and she respects him. This is something more writers need to do when writing female protagonists. So many of them act like their female leads will lose agency or be undermined if any male is more capable or as capable as her. Like girls are somehow only strong if they're better at everything than every man in their life, and the only ones qualified to teach them anything are other women. If a man being useful or competent in your story makes the women you write lose worth, then you need to write more worthwhile women. Fix your female characters. Don't make the male characters worthless just to compensate for your bad writing. Thankfully, the Apothecary Diaries never pulls that nonsense. People in the story have knowledge based on where they grew up and what they were allowed to learn or personally experienced, and they share that knowledge with people who were originally in no position to gain that knowledge in the first place. Maomao's knowledge comes from both her father's teachings and her own personal experience growing up in the brothels around the courtesans and their customers, and this is what makes her such a powerful tool for solving mysteries for Jinshi in the rear palace. But her father is much older than her and has far more experience than her, both in the brothels and the rear palace. And as a man in his era, he'd have far more access to a better education than she would. So of course he's going to be better than her at a bunch of stuff. And through him, we get to see what Maomao will eventually become as she gains more knowledge and experience. He's a version of her in the future, just a male one, and it's exciting. I mentioned before that she tried laying low, but ended up being promoted to the lady-in-waiting position. This was a result of her strong sense of justice. As much as she doesn't want attention, Maomao can't just ignore a sick or poisoned person when she can see a clear way to treat them. When she realized why ladies Gyokyo and Lihua's children were sick, she tried discreetly showing the cause so as to save the babies while remaining invisible. The cause being the white face powder that ladies used as makeup. The stuff was super poisonous and had already killed several of the Emperor's babies, and only Maomao knew this because she'd seen the powder's effects for herself in the brothels many times. And when she got found out, got her big promotion, and got instructed by the Emperor himself to treat the heavily poisoned Lady Lihua, she tried to lay low and do her job, even with Lady Lihua's ladies-in-waiting getting in her way. But once she realized that Lihua wasn't recovering because her ladies-in-waiting were still ignorantly putting white powder on her, Maomao dropped the good girl act, slapped the lady responsible for Lihua's makeup, dragged her by her hair, dumped all the white powder on her, and chewed the girl out for her ignorance. Then she proceeded to spend the next few months dominating the pavilion and treating Lihua her way until the lady consort was recovered and giving best girl some well-deserved headstrokes. It was so cool. I've rewatched that scene and that glorious slap about 50 times. I could spend hours talking about what makes Maomao such a powerful protagonist, like how she managed to deduce Lady Lishu's food allergies and consequently reduce the bullying from her ladies-in-waiting in general by just getting one of them on her side, or how she solved the whole poisoning mystery from the garden party and resolved the whole issue without further endangering the lives and relationships of the concubines involved, or how she directly helped and influenced the homes of the 4 high-ranking concubines and gained the allegiance of 2 of them through her actions. I could go episode by episode, explaining how and why Maomao's presence affected the outcome of each and every arc and why things would have turned out differently if she weren't the protagonist. People die in the palace all the time, don't get me wrong, but more people would have been dead without her. Certain relationships wouldn't have been formed or mended without her. Even if she'd somehow lived through the poisoning, Lady Lihua might have never learned a secret technique to keep the Emperor visiting her without Maomao sharing it with her. Lady Gyokyo might have still continued suffering from sleep deprivation without Maomao. The girl is essential everywhere she goes. Just having her around improves your daily life. Even the Emperor's personal cook and seamstress seem to come to her for guidance on simple things. But she isn't perfect. There's knowledge and experience she lacks. Her eccentricities can make her do dumb stuff. She's terrible at asking for help when she's in a desperate position because she just can't recognize the value people see in her. All in all, she's a well-rounded character who carries her show, and I love her to bits. She and Frieren have been the 2 most refreshing female protagonists I've seen in a while because they've both been written like real people. It's almost enough to make you believe that ladies might actually be real people. But I won't spread such baseless rumors around without further evidence. After all, women don't really exist. Now, do they? And that's all I have to say for today. I'm Prince Dumi, South African ruler of the entire world, and Maomao is best girl.